Hello everyone. Today we're talking a bit about secondary progressions because it seems that not a lot of astrologers really know how to use them, mainly because they gained their maximum effectiveness when the topocentric system of houses was discovered. Now the first mistake people make is that they use a 1-degree orb. The orb is not 1 degree, and I'll just demonstrate it shortly if you would just bear with me a bit. Now let's just briefly define secondary progressions. Secondary progressions are basically the revolution of the planets around the Earth, both in forward and in converse motion. We can also direct the angles and house cusps, forward and backward, and we can also progress to progressed aspects work, and regress to regressed aspects also work. Now let's say here, because in this system 1 day equals 1 year, so let's say on the 26th of October Venus is at 7 degrees of Sagittarius. On the 27th, it's at 8 degrees and 13 minutes. This jump from here to here in this system takes 1 year. So on the 26th, after 1 year, we move 1 day. So 7 to 8. After 1 year, we move also 1 day. 8 degrees and 13 minutes to 9 degrees and 26 minutes. So that's basically the secondary progression system, which is in a very simplified manner. Now let's look here at the horoscope of Katy Perry for the date when she gets married on October 23rd, 2010. Here we find Venus is in conjunction with Jupiter. Now the orbs here are very tight. They're minutes of arc. They're not 1 degree. They're a lot less than that. But the reason, as I said in the beginning, people don't use these very precise and accurate orbs is because they don't know the proper house system. Because if let's say you direct Saturn to an opposition with the 12th house, you need to know the orb of also the first thing you need is a rectified radix, because without a rectified radix you really cannot use these. You cannot use this technique without a rectified radix. So step 1 is the rectification of the radix, and if you don't know how to rectify a radix, you can check out my channel. I have a lot of videos on that. Now for the orbs, 11 minutes of arc for aspects between angles and house cusps, the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and the part of fortune. For the moon, the conjunction and opposition, it has an orb of 32 minutes, and all other aspects have an orb of 18 minutes for the moon. For Jupiter and Saturn, 8 minutes of arc for all aspects. Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto and the node, 2 to 3 minutes of arc. Now let's just demonstrate here with Katy Perry. Date of marriage, this date here, Venus conjunct Jupiter, and our orb is 11 minutes, below 11 minutes. And here we can see that it's 8 minutes of arc, and we can check it here. Here. Now an event just such as marriage doesn't happen just because of one aspect from one technique, although it could. But what clearly allows the event to happen is in primary directions, the ascendant moves to an opposition with the north node, which is basically the descendant moving to a conjunction. So it moves from here to here. I can show it to you here. where is it? Here, descendant conjunct north node. And this aspect basically sets off the event. This event is also supported by transits, especially the heavy transit of Pluto to the descendant. One of the most important transits are the transits of Pluto due to its slow motion. The transit of the north node in trine to the descendant also. These are basically timers for the event, the Mercury and the Venus on the ascendant. So that's basically Katy Perry. Let's move here to another example. Linda McCartney. Now Linda McCartney dies because due to breast cancer, and one of the indications, cancer is basically comes under the rulership of Pluto and Scorpio, and here we see the emphasis and the tendency for the development of cancer with the square first of Pluto to the ascendant of course being an angle very sensitive to health, and these three placements in Scorpio, the ascendant in Scorpio, and two planets in a damaged cosmic condition in Scorpio also, the moon being related to the breast in a sign related to cancer and in a house related to health. So that's basically what facilitated the development of cancer from a medical perspective. Now if we move to a more dynamic perspective, for the date of her death, this ascendant moves to a conjunction with Neptune in converse motion in secondary progressions. So it's basically a regression. It moves backwards to a conjunction with Neptune. Now the problem here is that these aspects will not appear with this tight of an orb if the radix is not rectified properly. And the rectification has to be done with topocentric techniques, of course. And you can never expect any kind of aspect with such clarity to appear in any other system. So that's basically our second example. Our third example here, which brings us to the problem with this technique. Let's look here at this Charles Chaplin horoscope. These are the secondary progressions for the date of death of his father. And the indicative aspect here is the square between Saturn and Mars. And as we said, the orb here is 8 degrees. And we can see here the square of Saturn, progressed and regressed. Both of them are in orb below 8 degrees. Also here, the moon as a timer, it's in conjunction with the 8th house, but this is in converse motion, so it doesn't appear on this chart. In primary directions, we have the ascendant in direct motion, opposes Mars, moves to an opposition with Mars this way. It moves from here to here to reach an opposition, and it moves in converse motion to an opposition with the Sun, so it moves from here to here to oppose the Sun. The movement of the angles in both primary and secondary progressions is very critical. They set off very sensitive, very important and vital events. So the problem here is, look at how slow the movement of Saturn is if we animate this chart. Now let's remember here that the natal Mars of Charlie Chaplin is at 13 degrees and 33 minutes. And we said our orb is 8 minutes for this, these kinds of aspects, because it's Saturn and Jupiter, 8 minutes. So look, it's in orb with his natal Mars, with a square with his natal Mars. Let's move backward 1 year, still in orb. 2 years, it's still in orb. Still an orb. We can move. We have plus minus 8 degrees from the exact aspect, which is basically about 10 years. So you have a square like this it 100% indicates a negative event, because we're uniting two malefics with a square. So 100% a negative event, but you cannot predict it. They prevent a prediction because they're an orb for 10 years. How are you going to predict an event with a time span of 10 years? It's very difficult. So that's the issue with these kinds of secondary progressions. Sometimes they prevent a prediction for many years. Well, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please leave a comment, and thank you very much for watching.